On a grey October morning in 1970, in the west of Melbourne, more than 100 men were at work high above the Yarra River, building what was meant to become one of the proudest bridges in the country, when in a single catastrophic instant, a span longer than a football field tore loose from the sky and fell 50 metres to the ground below. 2,000 tonnes of steel and concrete came down in seconds, and by the time the dust settled, 35 workers were dead. In what remains to this day, the worst industrial disaster in Australian history. This is the story of the West Gate Bridge, of the soaring ambition that built it, the chain of quiet errors that doomed it, and the Royal Commission that would later describe the entire tragedy in two devastating words: utterly unnecessary. During the late 1960s, Melbourne's western suburbs of Footscray, Sunshine and Altona underwent a massive expansion, rapidly transforming the region into a major industrial and residential powerhouse. Despite this rapid growth, the Yarra River remained a formidable physical and economic barrier, dividing the expanding west from the central business district and the Port of Melbourne, while forcing commuters and cargo onto congested inner-city roads or slow, inadequate ferry crossings. To break this geographic bottleneck, local councils and business groups campaigned for a high-capacity crossing, leading the Victorian government to establish the Lower Yarra Crossing Authority to finance and oversee the construction of a major toll bridge. This massive project was championed as a symbol of modern progress that would unite the city and unlock the economic potential of the entire region. Yet the immense scale of this civic ambition carried a quiet, unrecognised risk, as the pressure to deliver a landmark crossing began to shape every decision made on the banks of the Yarra. To fulfill this bold vision, the project turned to a structural system designed by the British engineering firm Freeman Fox and Partners, with construction overseen by Australian contractor John Holland. The design centred on the steel box girder, an engineering concept celebrated globally for being exceptionally light, modern and strong. Rather than using heavy traditional steel trusses, the multi-lane roadway would sit directly on top of long, hollow boxes fabricated from thin sheets of welded high-strength steel. This hollow design offered immense strength against twisting forces, while using a fraction of the steel required by older structures. The execution of this design required a highly unusual and demanding assembly method. Rather than building the spans piece by piece in the air, workers fabricated entire half spans on the ground, assembling segments into massive structures measuring 112 metres in length. Once completed, these 2,000-tonne steel structures were slowly hoisted 50 metres above the Yarra River using hydraulic jacks and steel cables. In theory, this lift-in-place method kept construction safe and swift by minimising high-altitude assembly. But once suspended in mid-air, these massive half-spans had to meet their counterparts with absolute mathematical precision. The tolerance for error at the joints was virtually non-existent, turning an elegant structural concept into an incredibly delicate operation where even a minor misalignment would invite severe, unanticipated stress. When the western half-span was lifted 50 metres into the air, the two steel structures failed to align, leaving a vertical camber mismatch of 114 millimetres between the northern and southern halves. Under the strain of this physical misalignment, a visible buckle appeared along the top flange of the steel box girder. This distortion was an observable physical anomaly, warping the metal in plain sight of the engineers instead of remaining hidden within abstract calculations. Just months earlier, on June 2nd, 1970, a similar steel box girder structure, the Cleddau Bridge in Wales, collapsed during construction, killing 4 workers. Although the engineering community knew of the disaster in Wales, the lesson of that failure, that thin steel box sections were highly vulnerable to buckling under uneven loads, did not travel effectively to Melbourne, leaving the visible buckle on the West Gate span to be managed as a minor deviation instead of an urgent structural threat. Despite the visible distortion, the momentum of the construction project did not falter. Instead of halting operations to investigate, managers allowed work to proceed, treating the warped steel as a temporary deviation rather than a systemic threat. On the ground, workers looked up at the span with growing unease, Yet official assurances consistently maintained that the bridge was safe. Driven by intense schedule pressure, decision-makers increasingly prioritized progress, narrowing their judgment at the very moment caution was required. This created a profound gap between the physical evidence of failure and official confidence. As days passed, the severe structural warning was normalized, quietly transforming an active danger into an accepted working condition. To force the two mismatched halves of the span into alignment, engineers designed an improvised physical correction. They ordered 10 concrete blocks, each weighing approximately 8 tons, to be positioned directly on top of the higher northern half span. This 80-ton load of temporary ballast, known as kentlage, successfully pushed the steel downward to meet the lower half, but the immense concentrated weight simultaneously worsened the structural distortion, deepening the buckle in the upper flange. Rather than recognizing the failure of the steel plates under this load, supervisors attempted to relieve the severe stress by altering the joint itself. On October 14th, the site engineer issued an instruction to loosen a line of high-strength bolts along the transverse splice. By unbolting the joint while the steel was still bearing the heavy concrete blocks, they hoped the plates would slide back into alignment. Instead, this sequence of actions stripped the bridge of its remaining structural strength, turning a corrective measure into the direct trigger of the disaster. At 11:50 in the morning on October 15, 1970, as workers gathered for lunch in the site huts directly beneath the span, the compromised steel structure gave way. In seconds, over 100 metres of steel and concrete, weighing roughly 2,000 tonnes, plummeted 50 metres into the Yarra River, crushing the huts below. Ruptured fuel tanks quickly ignited, sending fire through the wreckage as survivors began a desperate search. Emergency crews and volunteers worked through the night and into the following day in the freezing mud, confronting what remains the worst industrial disaster in Australian history. The morning after the disaster, the Victorian government announced a Royal Commission of Inquiry chaired by Justice Barber to investigate the structural collapse. Released the following year, the Commission's final report delivered a severe indictment of the entire project, condemning an over-ambitious design pushed far past sensible limits, a dangerous construction method, failed supervision, and poor communication between the participating companies. The Commission concluded that the tragedy of the 35 deaths was utterly unnecessary, noting that there was no sudden onslaught of natural forces or unexpected failure of materials. This verdict sent shockwaves through the international engineering community, triggering the temporary closure and immediate re-examination of similar box girder bridges worldwide. In the United Kingdom and across the Commonwealth, construction halted as engineers scrambled to verify the safety of their own designs. The tragedy forced an immediate reckoning, driving sweeping occupational health and safety reforms across Australia. These demands established a strict legal duty of care, making employers legally responsible for the safety of their workers. On the riverbanks, construction resumed in 1972 under rigorous new safety standards. Many of the surviving workers chose to return to the site, determined to finish the bridge for their fallen mates. The West Gate Bridge opened to traffic in November 1978. Today, it carries over 200,000 vehicles daily, standing as a major transport link built upon the lessons of a terrible cost. Today, the West Gate Bridge stands as a silent monument to the 35 lives lost in an utterly unnecessary tragedy. It reminds us that ambition must never outpace safety. Had you heard this story before? Share your thoughts below and suggest which Australian landmark we should explore next.